I would like to take this opportunity to reach out to fellow Christians, fellow Americans, black and white. We seem to be spending all of our time arguing about symptoms, and nobody seems to be addressing the problem. I believe the problem is pretty easily addressed. America is in a 150, 200-year-old state of denial. I feel I could take this opportunity to be blunt because culturally, black and white Americans have never been closer together. We have a generation of millennials who can't even believe there's a racial problem. This is the time to discuss this issue. What do I mean by being blunt? Simple. The black community in America for the past 200 years have been treated by the white people like crap. And we need to finally stand up and address this issue. Christians, please realize that every handle of every whip, every burnt cross, every branch of every tree that's ever hung a man is the plank in America's eye. We need to now address this and remove this plank. We cannot cherry pick history. Yes, we can talk about Thomas Jefferson and the immortal words that all men were created equal. I believe this was an insert from God. We can also talk about Abe Lincoln and the Civil War. But honestly, we know the Civil War was fought to reunite the Union. The fact that all men were created equal was a battle cry used to motivate the Northern troops. It wasn't the reason for the war. The South was fighting to separate themselves from the Union. One of their main issues is they didn't want the Federalists to tell them that they could no longer have slaves. This is the history of the Civil War. But with God's help, the North prevailed. The Emancipation Proclamation was written. The 13th Amendment soon followed. But was that it? Were blacks then free? Do any of us white Americans, or do a majority of you white Americans even know the black codes? What followed the 13th Amendment? These codes were written to suppress black Americans. They didn't have the right to vote in most states. They didn't have the right to bear arms. They couldn't even gather together to worship. Segregation and oppression, free but not equal. That was the plight of the American into the 60s. There are hundreds of examples that can be given of the atrocities that black Americans have lived through and experienced in those years. I'm going to talk about one. George Stenny, a 14-year-old black child who weighed 90 pounds, was 5 foot nothing. In one day, he was tried for the murder of 2 white girls. He was the youngest child in the 20th century to be convicted, sentenced, and executed. The kid had an all-white jury, an all-male all-white jury. The trial again took 1 day. His tax accountant attorney never appealed, never objected. It took 10 minutes for that all-white jury to convict him. The child couldn't even fit in the electric chair. They had trouble strapping him in and restraining him. It took 4 minutes to fry him and kill him. This is one example of what black Americans have suffered through in this great country of ours. There are many more. I'm not going to sit here and waste your time stating all of them, but I will ask you this. How many white people, because they were white, have been wrongfully convicted, and wrongfully sentenced? How many white people have you heard of that were killed and dragged behind a truck or hung from a tree because they were white? Think about that. I'm not here to bash America. America is the greatest country on earth. We are the greatest country on earth because we have been blessed by God. We were here to be a light to the rest of the world. Our Christian faith is the foundation of our Constitution. We can no longer live in this state of denial. I'm reaching out to Christians, white and black. We need to work together, and we need to resolve this. I have some examples of ways that I believe will work. To the churches of America, our Christian churches, the time of gathering together and huddling our congregations out of fear of losing them has to be put aside. We need to put our faith to work. White churches and black churches need to reach out to each other by assignment if necessary. Bible studies, church gatherings, church groups should be integrated. So together we can glorify and worship God. Remember when we were younger, we were told that the greatest achievement the devil has done in this country was to convince this country that he didn't exist. There are factions now in our government and in society that are trying to convince us that God doesn't exist. They call it a fairy tale. We know better. To everybody that has been touched by God, to everybody that has felt His presence, I'm reaching out to you. The church has been divided racially. I think it's all part of a master plan. We need to unite the church. This country was founded on a church and on its principles. We need to get back to that. As a community, we need to just reach out to each other. Racism is not the problem. Racism is the symptom. It's denial and a lack of understanding of each other that's the problem. Again, reaching out to the white people, instead of crossing the street because you see a black man walking on the same side of the street as you, would you walk up to the young man, stick out your hand and introduce yourself? Ask him if he's having a good day. And again, to the black community, reach out to white people. We could do this in our workplaces. We can do this at bars. We could do this anywhere. Wouldn't it be great if the communities got together and we actually had luncheons and dinners where we got together and ate together? I mean, these are not impossible wishes. These are easy to do. It's just put our fears aside. Let's stretch ourselves. Let's reach out to each other and get to know each other. And to the government, it should be we the people. To we the people. I believe these conditions must be met. We owe this debt. And to say that we do not owe this debt is in complete denial of actual history. I believe that public schools in the inner city need to be and must be the best schools in America. We need to do everything we can to make them the best schools in America. Free college for everybody may be unrealistic. If there's a young man or a young woman from the inner city who seeks to go to college, that college should be free. We should help in every way we can to make this happen. Hey, government, instead of taxing and restricting through regulations, forcing corporations to move out, taking their jobs with them, allowing open borders where people just walk across and take what service jobs are left. Let's bring our companies back. Let's secure our borders. Let's put Americans to work. Then, when you talk about redeveloping infrastructure, I believe that should include the inner city. I believe the inner city should be built up. Housing should be improved. Things can be done and should be done better. It's not hard to do. This, I believe, is my calling. This, I believe, is what I'm being asked to do. So I reach out to God and I pray for America. Allow them to listen, Lord. Help us achieve an understanding of one another. Amen.